Hey everyone, welcome. Today, we're going to dig into a huge topic, crisis logistics. We're going to break down what a crisis actually means for a supply chain and how basically everything you think you know about stability gets turned on its head when things start to go wrong.
All right, so first up, let's just dive right in by busting one of the biggest myths out there about how a supply chain crisis really gets started. It's almost never what you think it is.
You know, when you think of a crisis, you probably picture some big, dramatic headline. A major port suddenly closes, a border shuts down overnight. And yeah, of course, those things are crises. But the reality, the real start is often way more subtle. It's usually a slow burn. Lead times just start getting a little longer. Pricing gets kind of unpredictable, and your inventory coverage just doesn't feel as solid as it used to.
And that's the key, right? The real crisis isn't always that one single obvious breakdown. It's the moment the fundamental rules, the predictability you count on every single day, just start to fall apart. That is the real beginning.
And this idea actually has a name. It's called a system shock. See, a true logistics crisis is almost never one little problem in isolation. It's an event that sends shockwaves through many, many interconnected parts of your supply chain all at once.
And I mean, just look at the scale of this. A system shock isn't just a transport problem. It's suddenly a sourcing problem, and a customs problem, and a cash flow problem, and an inventory problem. All of these things are happening at the same time. Okay, so how does this actually spread so wide? Understanding how these shocks travel through the network is absolutely critical. It's not just about where the crisis is, it's about how you're connected to it.
So there are really two ways you're going to feel the pain here. The first one, direct disruption, that's the obvious one. The crisis hits a place you depend on directly. But the indirect disruption, that's the one that really catches people out. You could be thousands of miles away from the actual trouble, but you're still getting hammered with insane freight costs and supplier delays just because your network is connected to it.
And this, right here, is such a critical takeaway. This is one of the most important rules to remember. Your risk isn't about your physical location. It is all about your network.
It's also helpful to think of a crisis hitting in two ways. The first wave is that immediate in-your-face stuff. A route closes, a freight rate goes through the roof. Those are the first-order effects. But then, the second wave starts to roll in, and that's the slower, knock-on damage, like your stock levels getting all out of whack, your cash flow getting squeezed, and your customers noticing your service isn't what it used to be. And this is the classic trap, right? So many companies pour every bit of energy into fighting that first wave, but it's often that second wave, that sneaky chain reaction, that causes the real, lasting damage to the business.
Okay, so let's get into the next section. We're going to talk about where the real battle's actually fought in a crisis. And I'll give you a hint, it's not always where you think it is.
This is a perfect way to think about it. You see a truck that stopped at the border. Okay, that looks like a transport problem. But if you trace it all the way back, what was the real root cause? Well, maybe the customs documents were missing. And why was that? Because the supplier was waiting on something. And why were they waiting? A payment to the supplier failed days, maybe even weeks ago. See? The transport issue is just the symptom, not the disease.
Now, this next point is maybe one of the biggest mindset shifts you have to make in a crisis. In normal times, we're all trained to think of inventory as a cost, right? Something you want to minimize. But when a crisis hits, inventory does a complete 180. It literally flips from being a liability to being this incredible strategic asset. It's a buffer, it's a tool that buys you time, and it protects your ability to keep the lights on.
Okay, so if everything is completely unstable and totally unpredictable, what are you even trying to do? What's the goal here? Because it's definitely not business as usual.
Well, the very first thing you got to do is accept one simple fact. Perfection is completely off the table. If you're trying to run a flawless, perfectly optimized supply chain in the middle of a major system shock, you are setting yourself up to fail.
The whole game changes. You stop chasing that idea of perfection and you start focusing on completely new goals. Keeping the business running, figuring out what's most important, adapting in a controlled way, and just limiting the damage. It's all about making disciplined calls under pressure, not chasing some perfect, elegant solution.
All right, so how can you actually start thinking like this? Let's boil it down to 4 key rules. 4 pro tips that really separate the experts from the beginners when a crisis hits.
Okay, pro tip number 1, and we've said it before because it is so important. Stop thinking about where your buildings are. Start thinking about what your network touches, everywhere in the world. That is your real exposure.
All right, number 2. The next time you see a transport problem, your first question shouldn't be, how do we fix this shipment? It should be,
What broke further up the chain that caused this in the first place? You have to dig deeper to find that root cause.
And pro tip number 3, train yourself and your team to look past the immediate fire that you're trying to put out. The second a disruption hits, you should already be thinking about those second-order effects. What's going to happen next week? What about next month? Getting ahead of that second wave is an absolute game changer.
And finally, our last pro tip. Reacting fast is good, but reacting smart is so much better. A crisis is all about making really tough choices. Which customers do you protect? Which products get priority? Disciplined, smart prioritization will always beat just frantic, unfocused speed. So look, if there's only one thing you take away from all of this, it has to be this. A logistics crisis is not a single isolated event. It is a system shock that completely destabilizes your entire world.
And here's a really simple way to remember what that means in practice. A system shock changes everything all at once. Your routes, your costs, your timing, your stock, your replenishment plans, and the very decisions you have to make. They all change simultaneously.
And that really leaves us with one last big question for you to think about. Are your systems, and is your team's mindset actually built to watch for that early, creeping instability we talked about? Or are you just waiting for the big, obvious breakdown to finally tell you that you're in a crisis?